and welcome to my kitchen at home. Now, a while back I gave you my recipe for my favourite shortcrust pastry, and I promised you some more ways of using it. I already gave you my salted caramel banana cream pie, which is delicious, but today I'm going to show you how to make these really cute little mini Nutella pies. Now, these little pies are brilliant treats, and if you've been making any of my recipes recently, there's a good chance you've got everything you need already prepared, which is just pastry, cookie dough and Nutella. Now, the first thing to do is to prepare the filling, and this couldn't be simpler because it is literally just Nutella, but there is something you need to do to it first, and that is to freeze it, because you can put Nutella straight into a pie and bake it, but I find it goes a little bit dry when you do that, so I'm going to freeze it first. So I've got a piping bag here with a round nozzle, a small round nozzle. I'm going to load it up with Nutella. Now, it's important when you're piping not to let it spread too much, because these are going to be the fillings for very, very tiny pies, and if it's too wide, you're going to struggle to get it into your pastry case. So I have a little tray here with some greaseproof paper on it already, and I'm going to pipe little tall round balls rather than like flat smushy balls. Now, because Nutella is pretty sticky stuff, you might find it's quite difficult to detach yourself from your little blob. But just be very gentle so you're not pushing the blob out too wide. And once you've piped all your little Nutella blobs, they need to go into the freezer while you get on with the next bit, at least half an hour. So while my Nutella blobs are chilling out in the freezer, I'm going to make my cookie dough. And this is just my regular cookie dough recipe, but I'm going to make a half batch. So starting with the dry ingredients, I've got some plain flour here. I'm going to mix it together with salt and bicarbonate of soda. I'm just going to give that a whisk just to combine it quite well, and then put it to one side for later. And now I'm going to beat my butter with my two sugars. I've got caster sugar and light brown sugar, and I'm just going to beat them together briefly for like a minute. That will do. So next it's to add the egg and the vanilla, and I'm going to put in half an egg because this is half a batch. And a lot of you get freaked out about half eggs, but really easy. Just weigh your egg with your electric scales, which by now I hope you've got, and remove half of the weight of your egg, basically. I'm gonna add about a teaspoon of good quality vanilla extract and give it a little stir. And then that all goes in. And just beat that really briefly. And now I'm just gonna add my dry ingredients. Just folding them in briefly, just till it all comes together. And when it does, it's time to add chocolate chips. And I've got 75 grams of milk chocolate chips, which I've cut up really nice and fine. And when that's ready, I'll whack them in. And after just the briefest of folds, it's ready. And I'm probably not going to use all of this cookie dough, but as I've said before, there is no bad thing about having leftover cookie dough, because you can just whack it in the freezer and use it another time. I am going to roll 10-gram balls of this cookie dough though, and get it ready for the final bit. So I'm just going to pick bits off. I've got my measuring scales here, and 10 grams it is. And the good thing about this recipe is, because all this stuff can be kept for a later date, you don't have to make the full capacity. You can just make like a few if you want, for a little treat. Or you can make all of them for a patty. Woo! Alright, that's all my little cookie dough balls ready to go. I'm just going to put them into the fridge to chill out for a minute. I'll wrap my leftover cookie dough and put it in the freezer for a cookie emergency, and then I will get on with making my pastry cases. Now it's time to make the pastry cases. Now, I've already given you my recipe for shortcrust pastry, and you can click on the link for that. I have actually cut my pastry amount in half, so this is half a batch of that recipe, and I've squashed it into a sort of flat round disc so that it's easier for me to roll. So starting with a light coating of flour on my surface, and I'm also going to dust my rolling pin as well so that doesn't stick. I'm going to roll this round of pastry out until it's about 2 millimeters thick, which is quite thin, but because these are really small Nutella pies, you don't want most of it to be pastry, and you want to have some room for the filling, right? That's about right. Now it's time to chomp out some circles, and I'm using a round cookie cutter, and I've got a mini cupcake pan here already pre-greased. And you want your circle to be quite a bit bigger than the actual pan hole itself, because it needs to come up the sides of the pastry and it needs to be a little bit proud of the surface of the tin. So I'm going to start by chomping out my circles. And with them all chomped out, it's now time to line the tin, and you need to kind of very gently ease them into the holes. They're going to crease up and crinkle a little bit, but you can smooth those out as you go. Now, one of the reasons we're kind of making sure that the walls of the pastry cases are a little bit higher than the tin itself is because we're not going to blind bake these, because they're so small. That would be the biggest fiddle of all time. So they might shrink back a little bit, and this way it gives you a little bit of leeway. And now with all my pastry in, I'm just going to give the bottoms a quick prick with my fork. Now with all my bits and pieces ready, it's time to assemble these little Nutella pies. So to start with, I'm going to fill my little pastry cases with my frozen blobs of Nutella. Now if any of your Nutella blobs have kind of spread out like this one has, just leave those alone, because you don't want to have to force them into your pastry cases. And lastly, we just need to top them with our little cookie dough balls. I'm pushing these down a tiny bit, but not completely, because they will spread when they bake, and I don't want them to run over the edge of the pastry case. And that's it. Now I just need to bake these at 180 degrees C for 12 minutes. Right, they're cooled down, although I must admit they are also really delicious when they're slightly warm. So you can warm these up in the microwave for a couple of seconds if you want that. But I'm going to just try them at room temperature for now. Now, normally I wouldn't fill an entire pie with Nutella because it's super sweet, right? But because these are so little, it is just enough. So they're sweet. The shortcrust pastry isn't too sweet, so that balances it out really nicely. And the cookie on top is delicious. Oh, you should definitely give these a go. And if you don't have everything ready to go, like I said before, then you can, in an emergency situation, go and buy some shortcrust pastry from the supermarket, buy some cookie dough from the supermarket, buy a jar of Nutella, and you've got yourself a really super quick sweet treat. But I'd always recommend that you make everything from scratch, because it's so much more delicious and way more satisfying. Well, thanks so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this, and if you like this video and you like pastry a lot, then do check out my salted caramel banana tart recipe, because that is really nice. There's a link to that on screen right now. You can also subscribe and make sure you don't miss any of my uploads by clicking on the little bell down below. I'll be back next week, so in the meantime, I hope you make these and let me know on Instagram by hashtagging Cupcake Jemma. See you then.